Today, I want to start here with a question, and I want everyone to think about the internet. Think about the ways that the internet has changed everything that we do, from how we interact with one another, from the ways that we make purchases, from the ways that we watch movies and consume content. The internet's changed so much, yet there's still some industries that it hasn't had a big impact on. And one of those is banking and money. Let's think about how people carry around these pieces of paper, how they carry around these pieces of metal called coins. God forbid you carry around these other pieces of paper where you have to sign your name and write a number on it called checks, where you have to then go to a physical bank. So there's a lot that has not been done. Actually, need my clicker. So, can I get a clicker? Sorry. So what we're talking about today is we're going to talk about the evolution of the internet and really how that's pushing forward the next generation of money and of banking. So how many people here have ever heard of Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other cryptocurrency? Some of you? How many people actually own a piece? Okay, a couple, great. So the goal of today is to go through and talk about digital currencies and the ways that I feel that they're going to shape the way we live our life. So let's take a quick step back to the early 2000s. There was a game called Second Life that came out. Within Second Life, they had a currency. It was called Linden dollars. And within this game, you could, in virtual world, you can walk around, you can interact with people, you could buy land, you can build houses. You were able to create art. Some embassies even had an embassy within Second Life where you can go talk about visas and other things like that. And so through this, people started building an economy. An economy was built, and some people were even becoming millionaires by creating things like cars, where people would come to these sites, spend actual money, convert it into this Linden dollars that you could only use within Second Life, and buy digital assets. Fast forward a little bit, the world of Warcraft came out in mid-2000. Within here, they had their own economy. They used gold. And with this gold, you could buy things as your character was evolving and going on raids. This was a currency that you could use between players. And some of the things that we saw is that even in addition to that, marketplaces started springing up where people were paying with cash to buy this gold so that they can go and buy things in this virtual world. So there are examples of these digital currencies, but the big problem was that they were always confined within that environment, within that game. So what I'd like to do is take a look at how we could build a digital currency that we can use outside of just single areas and get outside of those silos and use it everywhere. And we'll go through some of the problems that we've had and really look at this new way of doing things. So to start, we're going to look at how exchanges happen in the real world. If I have a pair of shoes and I want to sell that pair of shoes to somebody else, I can hand them that pair of shoes, they hand me the money, and the transaction is done. I no longer have that pair of shoes. I can't give it to somebody else. I can't go out and resell it. It's gone, and that person now has it. And at the same time, there was no need for a middleman to be in the middle to validate that transaction. If we look at a digital shoe, if we had a digital pair of shoes, and I sold that pair of shoes to you, how would you know that that is the one pair of shoes, and that is the pair of shoes that I'm selling? And how do you know that I didn't email it out to a couple people? How do you know I didn't put it on a website where millions of people can download it? The problem with digital things of value is that for information, a printing press is a great thing, but for digital things of value, like money, digital products are a very bad thing. So how can we replicate this in the real world? So we're going to go through the ways that we can have these digital assets that are so easy to copy and send around, and how do we do that for something like money? So the example I'm going to start with is the way businesses watch their transactions and the ways that different businesses know who's been paid, who hasn't been paid. And it's called a ledger. But for this example, I just want everyone to think of an Excel spreadsheet. Most people probably aware of an Excel spreadsheet. It looks something like this. It's nothing fancy. There's some columns, there's a date, there's some description, the buyer, seller, and the amount. So here's my transaction. I sold my pair of digital shoes to my brother Kurt. He then went on eBay and sold it for $150 to Tim. Tim then gave it to Mike as a gift. So we can see this way of tracking assets so we can make sure that we know how these digital shoes have been passed around. But if it is just a single spreadsheet, then I can go and I can make changes to it. And how will everybody else have access to this information? So one thing we could do is take all these spreadsheets and make sure that they're on computers all over the world, and magically anytime there's a new transaction or something happens with that shoe, that your spreadsheet will automatically update. So in order to do this and make sure people aren't going back in time and changing it, or if someone gets hacked and someone wants to say, no, that's going to somebody else, we need to have rules that you cannot go back in time. So these spreadsheets are not, they're what's called immutable. You cannot go back in time and change the history. You can only add transactions going forward. So if you can see here on the second line, I not only sold them to Kurt, but then I went and sold them on eBay to Rob as well. In this system, that's not allowed, and if somebody tried doing that, they would be kicked off the system. Now, I mentioned it's only transactions going forward, so if a new transaction happens, I have that here, but as we see from line 1 and the last line there, I'm trying to sell, again, the same shoes. This system that I'm describing is known as blockchain. The way blockchain works, and blockchain is the fundamental piece of Bitcoin and why we can have digital transactions and still be able to understand where that came from and not be able to just copy and paste. So in this example here, Alice is trying to send 10 Bitcoin to Bob. And as you can see, everyone's ledger has all the same information, computers all over the world, and there's no central authority. So Alice can send directly to Bob, and all of these computers get updated in all of the ledgers, and they validate that it's following the rules, and if it is, every computer is notified, and all of the ledgers are updated. The origins of Bitcoin go back to 2008, and around this time there was a big financial crisis going on. Companies, insurance companies, banks that had been around for 100 years and more started to collapse, started to go under, and investors were losing, really bore the brunt of all of this collapse, losing trillions of dollars of investment money and retirement funds. So a person or group of people named Satoshi Nakamoto, we don't really know if it's a person or who it is, created this white paper and put it out on the internet. And it really described the blockchain and how we can create a form of money where the person can be their own bank and not rely on intermediaries to house and store their bank. Looking at why this is important, and it may seem like, well, we have money, we have all these other things. Why is this important? The importance is around inclusion. With Bitcoin, you don't need to ask permission to hold Bitcoin, to send Bitcoin. And what it does is it turns banking into not just a privilege like it's been, but a right. In a lot of areas in the world, people don't have access to banks. There's over 2 billion people in this world who don't have access to any bank. They're called unbanked. In the US alone, there's 7% of the population who are unbanked. 20% of the people are what we call underbanked. These are people who don't have access to traditional financial institutions. So what they need to do is go to pawn shops, payday loans, and other forms of financial institutions in order to be part of the financial economy. A story here from somebody I knew who had a Bitcoin ATM was telling me how it's being leveraged and how great it is with a lot of people who do what's called remittance. So there's a lot of people in this world who travel to different countries to work and then send their money back to their families back home. And it's a huge industry, but there's only a couple of ways to do that currently. And it's going through Western Union, who takes high fees. I heard stories of some people who were sending money through Western Union. If you look at this photo here, this is a line of people who are either depositing money or trying to take money out. So whether it's local gangs, local warlords, sometimes there were fees just to even get into the Western Union. So the $100 you may send back to your family, you may walk away with half or less of it. Another thing about money is that when you go and give a bank your money, it is no longer your money. You're giving the bank your money, and they have a duty to do their best to give that money back to you. They can do whatever they want with it. They can invest it. In the early 2010s, in Cyprus and Greece, there were big financial crashes. And banks started just closing down in fear of people coming and taking their money out. So in some situations here, I believe this is in Cyprus, people would have to line up. The only way they can get access to their money is through an ATM. Every day they would show up to the ATM and they would pull out what the limit of $60 per day. And then next day they would come back, stand in line, and try to pull out $60 again. This was the only way that they had access to their money. There's some people in Greece who were only given back 70% of the money that they originally had and losing life savings and large amounts of money. So with blockchain, as we look, there's more use cases than just currency. If you look at voter information, if you look at voting in general, when you place a vote, they're all stored in central locations where there's a database that can be hacked, intermediaries that can get in the way of modifying that. The way, and as we're describing blockchain, that allows your vote. You don't need a middleman to go in and place a vote. Once your vote is placed, you can't go back and change that vote. There's a huge opportunity here for voter fraud and other things. Tracking luxury goods is a major thing. There's a lot of counterfeit that goes on in the world. Being able to track that. Logistics is another area where being able to know where something has been and how it got to you, so then you know it's safe, it's authentic, are some of the big use cases also coming out of this blockchain revolution. So the industry itself is still early. As I said, 2008, the white paper was released kind of describing it. Bitcoin didn't start until, it wasn't in use until 2009. And we're really only starting to see some adoption in that. You can't use Bitcoin many places to make purchases. Only a little over 3 million people in the world actually own Bitcoin. And the technology itself still has a long way to go to scale. Having said all that, I think it's always great looking back to the early days of some of these technologies, and especially the internet. This is a map of the internet in 1977. Each of these little dots are a single computer. This is the entire internet. So from these humble beginnings, it's really interesting to see what the internet has become and how it's changed our life. But looking in June of 1977, it didn't seem like anything that was going to revolutionize commerce, the way we did our jobs, the way we watched movies. This is the first website ever created. And when it was created, the whole World Wide Web was on one person's computer. And the funny thing, the only way to access the web was if you had the same computer as that person. So looking at that, you're not envisioning high-def streaming. You're not envisioning a world of being able to play games with people all over the country and all over the world and video conferencing. But looking at what that potential could be and where it could go is a very important thing to do for these early technologies as they're coming along. This is a picture of the first website of a little-known bookstore. This is Amazon's website selling books. In no world did you imagine that they would be running the infrastructure of most of the internet, that they would be selling you your laundry detergent and dropping it off and free shipping and all these other things that it's grown into. And so it's very important to keep that in mind. Now, we've come a long way, and I think there's still a lot to go. But with every new disruptive technology and things that fundamentally shift the way that we live our lives and do business, I think this is a great quote. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. I think cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology, people are still laughing at us, and that's okay. Thank you.